Sweat beaded on Judge Harold Grayson's brow as he cackled in the packed Detroit courtroom, sentencing Tamika Jackson to 30 days for contempt after she defended her cousin. His gavel crashed, victory in his smirk, until she yanked a badge from her coat. United States Secret Service. Gasps erupted. Grayson's laugh choked off, his face a mask of shock. A petty traffic stop had spiraled into this, promising a reckoning that would scar lives and expose a corrupt core. What drove her to this explosive brink? Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more stories that demand truth. The late afternoon sun hung low over Detroit's crumbling east side, casting jagged shadows across cracked pavement and rusted chain-link fences. Exhaust fumes thickened the air as Darius Webb, a wiry 32-year-old mechanic with calloused hands and a faded lion's cap, maneuvered his beat-up pickup truck down a potholed street. He'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the garage, the kind of day that left grease under his nails and a dull ache in his back. His only plan was to grab a burger and crash on his sagging couch. But fate had other ideas. A squad car's lights flared behind him, red and blue slicing through the dusk like a predator's eyes. Darius sighed, easing the truck to the curb. He knew the drill. Keep calm, hands visible, no sudden moves. He'd been stopped before, too many times to count, always for nothing more than driving while black in a city that chewed up men like him and spat them out. The officer who swaggered up was Carl Hensley, a barrel-chested man in his 40s with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl etched into his sunburned face. His badge glinted under the streetlights, but his eyes carried the real authority, cold, hard, and itching for a fight. He rapped his knuckles on the window, motioning for Darius to roll it down. "License and registration," Hensley barked, his voice gravelly laced with disdain. Darius complied, fishing the crumpled papers from the glove box, his movements slow and deliberate. "What's the problem, officer?" he asked, keeping his tone even, though his pulse ticked up a notch. Hensley didn't answer right away. He squinted at the license, then tossed it onto the truck's hood like it was trash. "Step out," he ordered, stepping back with a hand. Resting on his holstered pistol, Darius frowned, confusion tightening his gut. "Sir, I wasn't speeding or nothing. What's this about?" Hensley's lips curled into a sneer, baring yellowed teeth. "I said step out, boy. You deaf or just dumb?" The word hit Darius like a slap, but he swallowed the anger rising in his throat. He pushed the door open and climbed out, standing 6 feet tall but feeling smaller under Hensley's glare. The cop circled him, boots scuffing the asphalt, then stopped abruptly. "You look like trouble," Hensley muttered, his voice low and menacing. "Bet you stole this heap. Where'd you lift it from, huh?" Darius blinked, incredulous. "This is my truck. I got the papers right there." He nodded toward the hood, but Hensley ignored him, leaning closer. "Don't lie to me, thug. I know you're kind, always taking what ain't yours." Before Darius could respond, Hensley grabbed his arm, wrenching it behind his back with a force that made his shoulder pop. Pain shot through him and he stumbled, catching himself against the truck. "Hey man, I didn't do nothing," he shouted, his voice cracking with frustration. Hensley laughed, a harsh, guttural sound, and shoved him hard. Darius's chest slammed into the truck's rusted fender, knocking the wind out of him. He gasped, trying to twist free, but Hensley pinned him, knee digging into his spine. "Keep squirming and I'll give you something to cry about," the cop snarled, his breath hot against Darius's ear. The street was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that meant folks were watching from behind curtains but wouldn't dare step in. Darius gritted his teeth, tasting blood from where he'd bitten his lip, and prayed this would end quick. That's when tires screeched nearby, a black sedan peeling around the corner and skidding to a stop. The driver's door flew open and out stepped Tamika Jackson, Darius's cousin, her 5'7" frame radiating fury. She'd been 3 blocks away, grabbing coffee after a long shift with the Secret Service, when a neighbor's frantic call tipped her off. Her dark eyes locked on the scene. Darius sprawled against the truck, Hensley's bulk crushing him. She strode forward, her boots pounding the pavement, her blazer flapping open to reveal the badge clipped to her belt. "Let him go now," she commanded, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Hensley glanced up, his scowl deepening, as he clocked her approach. "Who the hell are you?" he spat, not easing his grip. Tamika stopped 5 feet away, hands on her hips, chin tilted up. "Special Agent Tamika Jackson, United States Secret Service. That's my cousin you're assaulting. Back off." She reached into her blazer, pulling out her badge and holding it high, the silver catching the fading light. For a split second, Hensley hesitated, his grip loosening as confusion flickered across his face. Darius sucked in a ragged breath, hope sparking in his chest. Maybe this was over. Maybe she'd shut it down. But then Hensley's sneer returned, wider and uglier than before. "Secret Service, huh?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Well, ain't that cute? Don't mean squat here, sweetheart." He yanked Darius's arm harder, making him grunt in pain, and glared at Tamika. "Your little badge don't scare me. His kind don't get a free pass just 'cause you play dress-up." Tamika's jaw tightened, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. She'd faced men like Hensley before, power-drunk bullies who saw her skin before her authority, who thought they could trample anyone who didn't bow. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice low and steady, each word deliberate. "Release him or I'll have your badge on a platter by morning." Hensley chuckled, a dark, hollow sound, and stepped back, but not to let Darius go. He spun him around, slamming him face first into the truck's hood, then snapped cuffs onto his wrists with a vicious twist. "Resisting arrest," Hensley declared, loud enough for any onlookers to hear. "That's what this is now. You wanna play hero? Take it up with the judge." He shoved Darius toward the squad car, ignoring Tamika's shout of protest. She lunged forward, instincts screaming to intervene, but Hensley whipped around, pointing a thick finger at her. "Stay back or you're next," he warned, his eyes glinting with malice. "I don't care what you are. Around here, I'm the law." Darius stumbled, his cap falling to the ground, and shot Tamika a desperate look over his shoulder as Hensley forced him into the back seat. The door slammed shut, and Hensley climbed into the driver's seat, peeling off with a screech of tires. That echoed down the block. Tamika stood frozen for a moment, the badge still clutched in her hand, her breath coming in sharp bursts. She'd stopped the beating, or so she thought. She'd flashed her credentials, asserted her authority, and for a fleeting second it felt like enough. But Hensley's defiance had turned it upside down, dragging Darius into a nightmare she hadn't seen coming. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of the daze. It was Darius's girlfriend, voice trembling, asking what happened. Tamika forced calm into her tone, promising to fix this, but her mind was racing. This wasn't just a bad cop having a bad day. Hensley's words, his casual cruelty, the way he'd laughed off her badge, they stank of something deeper, something systemic. She bent down, picking up Darius's cap from the dirt, the fabric worn thin from years of use. Her cousin wasn't a criminal, he was a target. And now, because she'd stepped in, he was cuffed and gone, hauled off to a precinct she knew wouldn't listen. She stuffed the cap into her pocket, her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. She'd fight this, she told herself, storming. Back to her sedan. She'd get him out, expose Hensley, make it right. But as she drove toward the station, the weight of what she didn't yet know pressed down on her. This was only the beginning, and the war she'd just ignited would burn hotter and fiercer than she could imagine. The streets blurred past her window, a maze of faded brick and flickering neon, each block a testament to a city that had seen better days. She replayed the scene in her head. Hensley's sneer, Darius's pained grunt, the cuffs clicking shut. She'd faced threats before, stared down men with guns and grudges in her decade with the Secret Service. But this felt different. Personal, racial. A line had been crossed, and not just against Darius, against her too. Her badge was supposed to mean something, supposed to command respect, but Hensley had spat on it like it was nothing. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles paling against her dark skin. She'd make him pay for that. She'd tear this whole thing open, whatever it took. But deep down, a sliver of dread wormed its way in. What if this wasn't just one man? What if it was the whole damn system waiting to crush them both? She shoved the thought aside, focusing on the precinct ahead, its squat concrete bulk looming under sodium lights. She'd get Darius out tonight. She had to. Anything less wasn't an option. The precinct smelled of stale coffee and sweat. A squat brick fortress hunched under Detroit's graying skyline, its flickering fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped flies. Tamika Jackson pushed through the heavy glass doors, her boots thudding against chipped linoleum, the Secret Service badge swinging from her belt like a silent war drum. Her pulse hammered as she replayed the traffic stop. Darius pinned to the truck, Hensley's sneer, the cuffs snapping shut. She'd stopped the beating, flashed her authority, thought she'd won a skirmish. Now, standing in the precinct's dim lobby, she felt the air shift, thick with something uglier than one rogue cop. She approached the desk, where a sergeant with a graying moustache and a paunch spilling over his belt sat hunched over a crossword puzzle. His name tag read Sergeant Malone, and his watery blue eyes flicked up, sizing her up with a smirk that didn't reach them. "I'm here for Darius Webb," Tamika said, her voice clipped, professional, though her fingers twitched with the urge to slam them on the counter. "Arrested an hour ago by Officer Carl Hensley. I need to see him, and I want the dashcam footage from the stop." She slid her badge across the desk, the metal scraping against scratched wood, a quiet declaration of who she was. Malone leaned back, chair creaking under his bulk, and picked up the badge like it was a toy. He turned it over, squinting, then let out a low, raspy chuckle that grated on her nerves. "Secret Service, huh? Fancy, but your boy's in processing. No visitors till he's booked." He tossed the badge back, letting it clatter onto the desk. Tamika caught it before it slid off, her jaw tightening. "He's not my boy. He's my cousin, and that stop was illegal. I was there. Hensley, I assaulted him, no provocation. I'm filing a complaint, and that footage will prove it." Malone's smirk widened, his yellowed teeth peeking through chapped lips. "Dashcam? Sorry, darling, that unit's camera's been glitchy for weeks. Ain't no footage to show." His tone was smug, rehearsed, like he'd said it 100 times before. Tamika's stomach twisted, but she kept her face stone cold, a trick she'd honed facing down threats in DC back alleys. "That's a lie," she said, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a steel-edged whisper. "Every squad car's equipped, and I saw the light blinking. You're covering for him." Malone shrugged, unfazed, and scribbled something in his puzzle. "File. Your complaint if you want. Won't change the charge, resisting arrest. Kid's got a mouth on him. Hensley's words gold round here." He waved her off, turning back to his paper like she was a fly he'd swatted. Tamika stepped back, fury simmering beneath her calm exterior. She'd expected pushback, but this was a wall, deliberate and unyielding. She pulled out her phone, typing a formal complaint to Internal Affairs, her thumbs flying over the screen as she detailed Hensley's slurs, the shove, the cuffs. She hit send, a small spark of triumph flaring in her chest. If the precinct wouldn't listen, she'd go higher. She'd fought bigger battles than this, taken down cartel runners with less evidence. This was her turf now, and she'd make them regret crossing her. She turned to leave, planning to call her supervisor for backup, when the lobby doors banged open. 2 uniforms dragged Darius in, his wrists cuffed behind him, his shirt torn, a fresh bruise blooming purple across his cheekbone. His eyes met hers, wide with fear but flickering with relief. "Tamika," he croaked, voice hoarse. "They're lying, I didn't—" "Shut it," Hensley barked, storming in behind him, his meaty hand clamping onto Darius's shoulder. He shoved him toward a holding cell, then spun to face Tamika, his bulk filling the doorway. "You again," he growled, his buzz-cut scalp gleaming under the lights. "Thought I told you to back off." Tamika squared her shoulders, stepping into his space, her badge catching the glare. "And I told you I'd have your badge. That complaint's filed. You're done." Hensley's eyes narrowed, a predator sizing up prey, then he laughed, a sharp barking sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "You think that changes anything? You're out of your depth, girl." He turned away, slamming the cell door behind Darius, the clang ringing in her ears. She stood there, fists clenched, watching through the bars as Darius slumped onto a metal bench, head in his hands. She'd gotten the complaint in, forced their hand, or so she thought. She'd won this round, hadn't she? Exposed Hensley's brutality, set the wheels turning. But the precinct's hum resumed, officers shuffling papers, phones ringing, Malone scratching at his puzzle. No one cared. No one moved. She lingered, waiting for a shift, a sign her authority had teeth. Then Hensley reappeared, swaggering back, with a manila folder, a grin splitting his face like a jack-o'-lantern. "Hey, Jackson," he called, loud enough for the room to hear. "Your cousin's in deeper now, assaulting an officer. Look at this." He slapped the folder onto the desk, flipping it open to reveal a photo. His own face, a faint red mark on his jaw, time-stamped an hour ago. "He swung at me in the car. Got witnesses, too." Tamika's breath caught, a cold wave crashing over. "Haros, that's fake," she snapped, snatching the photo. The mark was too clean, too staged, nothing like the chaos of the stop. "He was cuffed the whole time. You're framing him." Hensley leaned in, his breath sour with tobacco, his voice a low hiss. "Prove it." "Oh, wait, you can't. No footage, remember?" He straightened, smirking at Malone, who nodded like they'd rehearsed this dance. "Add it to the sheet, Sarge. Felony now." Malone scribbled, not even glancing up, while Hensley sauntered off, whistling a tuneless melody. Tamika stared at the photo, her complaint's triumph curdling into dread. Darius lifted his head, meeting her gaze through the bars, his bruise stark against his skin. "Tamika, what's happening?" he whispered, voice trembling. She couldn't answer, her throat tight with rage and helplessness. This wasn't just Hensley anymore. The missing footage, the fake photo, Malone's indifference, it was a machine. A grinding, oiled beast that chewed up complaints and spat out lies. Her badge, her title, they'd meant nothing here. She'd pushed back, thought she'd gained ground, but they'd flipped it, buried Darius deeper. Assaulting an officer. That was years, not days, a felony that could steal his life. She stepped closer to the cell, gripping the bars, her knuckles paling. "I'll fix this," she said, forcing certainty into her words. "I'll get you out." But as she turned away, Hensley's whistle lingered in the air, a taunt that followed her out the door. She'd filed the complaint, sure, but they'd countered with a blow she hadn't seen coming, a lie so bold it mocked her every move. Outside, the night had swallowed Detroit, streetlights buzzing faintly over empty lots and sagging porches. She climbed into her sedan, slamming the door, the sound swallowed by the city's hum. Her phone buzzed, a text from her supervisor. "Heard about your complaint. Stay out of it. Locals handle their own." She stared at the screen, disbelief, warring with fury. Even her own chain of command was pulling back, leaving her exposed. She'd thought she'd started a fight she could win, but now Darius was bruised, caged, and facing a fabricated felony, all because she dared to challenge Hensley. What kind of system let this happen? Who else was in on it? She started, the engine, tires crunching gravel as she peeled out, her mind racing. She'd dig deeper, find proof, tear this apart. But as the precinct faded in her rear view, a chilling truth settled in. This wasn't a battle against one man. It was a war, against something vast, something that wouldn't let her win easy. What would they throw at her next? Now let's hear from you. Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think Tamika's fight against this crooked system is worth it, or a number 2 if you tell her to walk away before it gets worse. If you're raging at Hensley's dirty tricks, smash that like button, and if you're ready to see this justice war unfold, hit subscribe for the next twist. So what's Tamika facing now that her complaints turned into a trap? Could the courtroom ahead hold her cousin's freedom? Or something far darker? Stick around to find out. The Wayne County Courthouse loomed over downtown Detroit like a stone giant, its gray facade streaked with decades of grime, windows glinting dully in the morning sun. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and nervous sweat, the kind of place where justice was supposed to breathe, but often choked instead. Tamika Jackson strode through the double doors into Courtroom B, her boots clicking against the scuffed marble floor, her blazer crisp despite the sleepless night. She'd spent poring over Darius's case. Her cousin's arraignment was today, and she'd come prepared, armed with her witness account, her badge, and a fire in her gut that hadn't dimmed since Hensley's frame-up at the precinct. She took a seat behind the defense table where Darius sat, his wrists cuffed, his bruised cheek a stark shadow against his ashen skin. He glanced back at her, offering a weak nod, his broad shoulders slumped under the weight of the felony charge now hanging over him, The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs, spectators cramming the pews, their eyes darting between Darius and the judge's bench. Tamika scanned the room, noting the prosecutor, a wiry white man in a cheap suit, flipping through notes with a smug tilt to his lips. The defense attorney, a jittery public defender barely out of law school, fidgeted beside. Darius, his tie askew, his briefcase spilling papers. She'd met him yesterday, begged him to fight hard, but his stammered promises hadn't inspired confidence. Then the bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise," and the room snapped to attention as Judge Harold Grayson swept in, his black robe billowing like a storm cloud. He was a hulking figure in his late 60s, with a jowly face, thinning silver hair, and eyes that glinted with a mix of boredom and contempt. His reputation preceded him, a hardliner who'd sent more black men to prison than anyone in the county, a man who wielded his gavel like a sledgehammer and took pride in it. Grayson settled into his high-backed chair, the leather creaking under his bulk, and banged the gavel once, the sound sharp and final. "Court is in session," he drawled, his voice a slow, syrupy growl that filled the room. He shuffled papers, peering over his glasses at Darius, then leaned back, folding his thick arms. "Let's make this quick. State your case, Mr. Proctor." The prosecutor, Proctor, rose, with a theatrical flourish smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, the defendant, Darius Webb, stands accused of resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. The evidence is clear. Officer Carl Hensley's testimony, a photograph of his injuries, and the defendant's belligerent behavior during a lawful stop." He gestured toward Darius, his tone dripping with disdain. "This is a simple matter of law enforcement, doing its job against a man who thinks he's above it." Tamika's fists clenched in her lap, her nails digging into her palms as Proctor sat down, that smug tilt still plastered on his face. The defense attorney stood, clearing his throat, his voice thin and shaky. "Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. The stop was unjustified, and we have a witness, Special Agent Tamika Jackson, who can testify to the officer's aggression." He nodded toward her, and Tamika rose, smoothing her blazer, her badge clipped visibly to her belt. She stepped to E, the witness stand, swearing in with a steady hand on the Bible, her dark eyes locking onto Grayson's. This was her moment. She'd seen the stop, knew the truth, and her credentials would force them to listen. She'd get Darius out of this mess, or at least onto bail. "State your name and occupation," the clerk said, monotone. "Tamika Jackson, Special Agent, United States Secret Service," she replied, her voice clear, cutting through the room's hum. A ripple of whispers spread through the gallery, heads turning, but Grayson's expression didn't shift. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench, his jowls quivering slightly. "Go on then," he said, his tone flat, but edged with impatience. Tamika straightened, her posture rigid, and began, and 2 days ago I witnessed Officer Carl Hensley pull over my cousin Darius Webb on East Warren Avenue. There was no cause, no speeding, no violation. Hensley used racial slurs, accused him of theft without evidence, and assaulted him, pinning him to his truck. I intervened, identified myself as Secret Service, and demanded he stop. He ignored me, cuffed Darius, and later fabricated an assault charge with a staged photo. The dashcam footage, which the precinct claims is missing, would prove this. Her words hung in the air, precise, unyielding, each one a brick in the wall she was building to free Darius. She glanced at him, saw a flicker of hope in his eyes, and felt a surge of certainty. She'd laid it out, a federal agent's testimony against a dirty cop's lies. The room was silent, the gallery leaning in, the young attorney nodding like he'd finally found his footing. She'd won this round, hadn't she? Exposed the stop's illegality, put Grayson on notice. But then, the judge shifted, his chair groaning and his lips twitched into a faint, crooked smirk. He tapped his pen against the bench, a slow, deliberate rhythm, then cut her off mid-breath as she opened her mouth to elaborate. "That's enough, Miss Jackson," he said, his voice booming now, thick with condescension. "I've heard all. I need to hear." Tamika blinked, caught off guard, but held her ground. "Your Honor, I haven't finished. The systemic bias—" Grayson waved a meaty hand, silencing her. "Oh, I think you have," he said, leaning back, his smirk blooming into a full, mocking grin. "You're playing the race card, aren't you? Typical. Some fancy badge don't make you an expert on my courtroom." He chuckled, a deep, rolling sound that echoed off the paneled walls, and the gallery stirred, a few spectators snickering along. Tamika's chest tightened, heat rising in her throat, but she kept her face a mask of calm. She'd faced worse, trained for worse. She reached into her blazer, pulling out her badge, and held it high, the silver flashing under the fluorescent lights. "This isn't about race cards," she said, her voice steady, cutting through his laughter. "It's about facts. I'm a federal agent and I saw a crime." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath, and Grayson's chuckle died in his throat. His eyes widened for a split second, locked on the badge, and the gallery fell silent. Every head swiveling between her and the bench. She'd done it, she thought, seized control, turned his mockery into shock. Her authority had weight now, undeniable, a federal shield against his bias. She lowered the badge, clipping it back to her belt, her gaze never leaving his. But then Grayson's face hardened, the shock melting into something colder, more dangerous. He leaned forward, his jowls quivering with barely contained rage, and banged his gavel so hard the wood cracked. "Sit down, Miss Jackson," he snapped, his voice a whip. "Badges don't rewrite facts here. I've seen enough sob stories to know what's what." Tamika hesitated, her victory slipping through her fingers like sand, but she returned to her seat, the gallery's whispers buzzing around her. Grayson turned to the prosecutor, nodding. "Bail?" Proctor stood, smirking again. "No bail. Your Honor, the defendant's a flight risk given the assault charge." The defense attorney stammered, "But Your Honor, he has no record." Grayson cut him off with a glare. "No bail," he declared, his tone final, his smirk creeping back. "Defendants remanded to custody, next case." He banged the gavel again, and the bailiff hauled Darius up, his cuffs rattling as he was led away. Darius shot Tamika a desperate look over his shoulder, his hope snuffed out, and she mouthed, "I'll fix this," though her own certainty wavered. She sat frozen as the courtroom emptied, Grayson's laughter still ringing in her ears, a taunt that drowned out her badge's shine. She'd stood up, testified, wielded her authority, and for a fleeting moment the room had bent to her will. But Grayson had flipped it, dismissed her like she was nothing, locked Darius away without a second thought. The gallery's snickers, Proctor's smirk, the judge's sneer, they all piled on. A public shaming that stung worse than Hensley's shove. She'd thought her credentials would break through, force justice into this rigged game. But Grayson had turned it into a joke. As she gathered her things, the weight of his words sank in. Badges don't rewrite facts, he'd meant her. Facts, her truth, her skin. This wasn't just a courtroom, it was a battlefield, and she'd lost this round hard. Darius was gone, caged without bail, and she was left standing in the wreckage, her badge a useless shield against a man who'd already judged them both. Outside, the Detroit wind bit at her face, carrying the distant wail of sirens. She clutched her blazer tighter, replaying the scene. Her testimony, the badge, Grayson's laugh. She'd get Darius out, she swore to herself, storming toward her sedan. She'd dig up dirt, fight harder, make them pay. But as she drove off, the courthouse's shadow stretched long behind her, a reminder that this war was only beginning, and the next blow would hit harder than she could brace for. The sun had barely dipped below Detroit's jagged skyline, painting the city in hues of bruised purple, when Tamika Jackson pulled into the parking lot of her modest apartment building on the west side. The day's courtroom defeat still gnawed at her, Judge Grayson's mocking laughter looping in her mind like a taunt she couldn't shake. Her sedan's engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound breaking the stillness of the evening. She'd spent the drive from the courthouse replaying every word of her testimony, every snicker from the gallery, every second of Darius's desperate glance as he was hauled away without bail. Her badge, her truth, her fight, all of it had crumbled under Grayson's gavel, and now her cousin was locked in a cell, bruised and alone. She stepped out, slamming the door harder than she meant to, her breath fogging in the crisp air. She needed a plan, a way to hit back, but first she needed rest, a moment to breathe. Her building was a faded brick relic, 3 stories of chipped paint and flickering hallway lights, the kind of place that housed working folks who kept their heads down. She climbed the stairs to her second-floor unit, her boots thudding against worn concrete, her keys jangling in her hand. The hallway was quiet, save for the distant hum of a TV behind a neighbor's door. She reached her apartment, number 206, and froze. The door hung ajar, splintered wood jutting from the frame where the lock had been smashed. Her pulse spiked, training kicking in as she dropped her keys and drew the Glock from her hip holster, the weight familiar, grounding. She nudged the door open with her foot, stepping inside, gun raised, eyes scanning the shadows. The place was a wreck. Her couch was slashed, stuffing spilling onto the floor like guts from a wound. Glass crunched under her boots, the remains of her coffee table's shattered top. Bookshelves lay toppled, pages torn and scattered, her TV smashed into a spiderweb of cracks. But it was the walls that stopped her cold. Snitch, scrawled in dripping red paint, the letters jagged and furious, streaking down to the carpet in bloody trails. Her breath caught, a mix of rage and dread coiling in her chest. She swept. The apartment, room by room, bathroom mirror shattered, bedroom mattress gutted, but no one was there. The intruders were gone, leaving chaos in their wake. She holstered her gun, hands trembling slightly as she pulled a folded note from the kitchen counter, pinned under a shard of glass. In block letters, it read, "Back off, or he's dead." No signature, but she didn't need one. This was Hensley's work, his retaliation for her complaint, her testimony, her defiance. Tamika's mind raced, piecing it together. She'd pushed him at the precinct, called him out in court, thought she'd gained ground by exposing his lies. She'd felt a flicker of power, a sense that the Secret Service could shield her, that justice might bend her way. She grabbed her phone, dialing 911, her voice steady as she reported the break-in, then called her supervisor, Agent Paul Carver, a gruff white man in his 50s who'd mentored her through her early years. "Paul, it's Tamika," she said when he picked up, her tone urgent. "My place got hit. Vandalized, threats left. It's Hensley, the cop I filed on. I need backup." There was a pause, too long, and then Carver's voice came through, flat, detached. "Tamika, I heard about your little stunt in court. You're stirring a hornet's nest. Locals don't like feds meddling." She gripped the phone tighter, disbelief sharpening her words. "This isn't meddling. They framed my cousin and now they're coming for me. I'm Secret Service, Paul. That means something." Another pause, then a sigh. "It means you should stay in your lane. File a report, sure, but don't expect us to ride in. Detroit PD handles its own messes. You're on your own here." The line clicked dead, and Tamika stared at the screen, her lifeline severed. She'd thought her agency would step up, protect one of their own, that her badge would rally them. A small victory, she'd assumed, reporting it up the chain. But Carver's words landed like a punch. She was alone, exposed, her authority meaningless against Hensley's reach. She sank onto the ruined couch, the note crumpled in her fist, replaying the day. She'd fought, stood tall, and now her home was a battlefield, her safety shredded. She'd call the cops, get this on record, force Hensley's hand into the light. She dialed again, giving the address to a bored dispatcher, then waited, staring at the red paint, the threat glaring back. Minutes stretched into an hour. No sirens, no uniforms, just the hum of the city outside. She paced, adrenaline fading into a cold, gnawing unease. Then her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Check on your boy." Her heart lurched, and she bolted out, racing down the stairs, the threat's weight slamming into her. Darius. Hensley wasn't just coming for her. He was hitting where it hurt most. She floored it to the county jail, 10 miles across town, weaving through traffic, the sedan's engine roaring. The jail was a concrete slab under floodlights, barbed wire glinting like teeth. She flashed her badge at the gate, demanding to see Darius, her voice a blade, cutting through the guard's hesitation. "Now!" she snapped, and he relented, leading her through clanging doors to the visitation room. But when Darius shuffled in, her breath stopped. His left eye was swollen shut, a purple welt across his temple, blood crusted on his split lip. He moved slow, clutching his side, ribs clearly cracked under his jumpsuit. He sank into the chair across the glass, his good eye meeting hers, dull with pain. "Tamika," he rasped, voice barely audible. "They jumped me." "Guards," said Hensley sends his regards. She pressed her hand to the glass, fury boiling over, her nails scraping the surface. "When?" she demanded, though she knew the answer. "Hour ago," he said, wincing as he shifted. "3 of them. Told me to tell you to quit. Said next time I don't wake up." Tamika's vision blurred, rage and guilt warring inside her. She'd reported the vandalism, thought she'd forced Hensley into a corner, that the Secret Service would shield them. A win, she told herself, a step toward justice. But this was his counterattack, a brutal personal blow that dwarfed her trashed apartment. Darius wasn't just bruised, he was broken, targeted, because she dared to fight. The guards smirked behind him, one whispering into a radio, their eyes glinting with Hensley's malice. She stood, slamming her fist against the glass, the sound echoing in the sterile room. "I'll kill him," she hissed, not caring who heard. Darius shook his head weakly. "Tamika, don't, they'll bury us both." But she was already moving, storming out, the jail's clang fading behind her. She'd thought her complaint, her badge, her stand in court had gained her ground. But Hensley had flipped it, turned her defiance into a weapon against her own blood. Her apartment was a warning. This was a declaration of war. She climbed into her car, engine roaring to life, her mind a storm of plans. Expose him, find proof, burn his world down. But as she sped into the night, the note's words looped in her head. "Or he's dead." Hensley wasn't playing. He was promising. And now, with Darius bleeding and her agency turning its back, she realized the fight she'd started was spiraling into something she might not control. What do you think? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you're with Tamika, ready to see her take Hensley down no matter the cost, or a number 2 if you think she's in too deep to win this fight. If this retaliation's got your blood boiling, smash that like button, and if you're itching to see how she strikes back, hit subscribe for the next chapter. So, what's Hensley hiding that's worth breaking Darius to protect? Will Tamika's next move uncover a conspiracy, or dig her grave deeper? Stay tuned to find out. The night pressed heavy on Detroit, a shroud of fog rolling off the river, cloaking the city's jagged edges in a damp gray haze. Tamika Jackson sat hunched over her kitchen table, the only light a flickering bulb casting shadows across the wreckage of her vandalized apartment. Broken glass glittered on the floor, the word snitch still glaring from the wall in crimson streaks. Her Glock rested beside her, a cold comfort, while her laptop screen glowed with precinct logs she'd hacked into using old Secret Service back doors. Darius's battered face haunted her, his swollen eye and cracked ribs a fresh wound she couldn't shake. Hensley's retaliation had hit hard, turning her small victories, her complaint, her courtroom stand, into a nightmare. She'd reported the vandalism, seen Darius's beating, thought she'd force accountability. Now, with her agency abandoning her and her cousin suffering, she knew this was bigger than one dirty cop. She needed proof, something to blow it open, and she'd tear through every file to find it. Her fingers danced across the keys, pulling up arrest records, duty rosters, anything tied to Carl Hensley. She'd trained for this, spent years tracking threats across state lines, her mind sharp as a blade. Patterns emerged in the data, Hensley's stops skewed toward black men, charges like resisting arrest piling up, evidence vanishing like smoke. Then she found it, buried in a disciplinary report from 3 years back. Hensley and 5 other officers flagged for irregularities in a drug bust, suspects claiming planted evidence, but the case dismissed by a judge, Grayson. Her pulse quickened, a thread forming. She cross-checked names, dates, and there it was. A dozen arrests, all black defendants, all with missing footage, all landing in Grayson's courtroom with heavy sentences. Payoffs, she realized, her breath catching. Hensley wasn't just a thug. He was part of a racket, a corrupt ring profiting off framed lives, and Grayson was the gatekeeper. Tamika leaned back, the chair creaking under her, adrenaline surging. This was it, the crack in their armor. She needed to get it out, expose them before they buried Darius deeper. She grabbed her phone, scrolling to a contact, Jamal Carter, a scrappy investigative reporter she'd met during a sting op years ago. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy but alert. "Tamika, it's 2 in the morning. What's up?" She didn't waste time. "I've got something big. Corrupt cops framing black men. Hensley's the muscle, Grayson's the judge. I've got logs, patterns, proof. Can you run it?" Jamal whistled low. "That's a bombshell. Send it over. If it checks out, I'll air it tomorrow." She emailed the files, her heart pounding as she hit send. This was her win, her counterstrike. The story would hit the airwaves, spark outrage, force an investigation. She'd turned Hensley's retaliation into her weapon, or so she thought. Morning. Broke grey and cold, the fog lingering as Tamika paced her ruined living room, waiting for Jamal's call. Her phone buzzed at 8, his voice crackling through. "It's live, Tamika. Local news picked it up. Full segment. You're a hero out there." She flipped on her cracked TV, the screen flickering to life. A news anchor's polished voice filled the room. Shocking allegations of corruption in Detroit PD, tied to Officer Carl Hensley and Judge Harold Grayson. A whistleblower claims a ring of officers frame black men for profit, with evidence disappearing and sentences stacking up. The segment cut to protesters outside the precinct, signs waving, voices chanting for justice. Tamika's chest swelled, a rare smile tugging at her lips. She'd done it, flipped the script, put Hensley and Grayson on their heels. Darius would be safe now, the pressure too hot for them to touch him. She'd won this round, hadn't she? The victory lasted 3 hours. At 11, her phone rang again. This time her supervisor, Paul Carver. She answered, expecting grudging support, maybe even praise. "Paul, you see the news, it's breaking wide open." His voice was ice cutting through her hope. "Tamika, what the hell did you do?" She frowned, confusion tightening her grip. "What I had to. Exposed a racket. It's the truth." Carver's sigh was heavy, laced with something dark. "You're suspended, effective now, pending review. Psych eval came back, says you're unstable, obsessive. I tried to warn you." Her stomach dropped, the room tilting. "Suspended? That's bullshit, Paul. I'm not unstable and you know it. This is retaliation." He didn't flinch. "Orders came from above. You leaked classified data, crossed lines. You're done until we say otherwise." She slammed the phone down, breath ragged, disbelief warring with fury. A psych eval? She'd never taken one, not recently. It was fake, doctored, just like Hensley's photo of his bruised jaw. She'd exposed them, thought she'd seized control. But they'd struck back harder, turned her own agency against her. Her badge, her shield, stripped away in a heartbeat. She paced, mind reeling, when her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Hospital. Now." Her blood ran cold, Darius's beaten face flashing in her mind. She grabbed her keys, gun and bolted, the sedan screeching out of the lot toward Detroit General. 15 miles of traffic blurring past as dread clawed her throat. The hospital's sterile halls stank of bleach and despair, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as Tamika shoved past nurses to the ICU. Darius lay in a bed, tubes snaking from his arms, a machine beeping faintly beside him. His face was a mask of bruises, fresh cuts weeping blood, his chest barely rising. A doctor, a wiry man with tired eyes, approached, clipboard in hand. "You family?" he asked. "Cousin," she said, voice tight. "What happened?" He glanced at the chart, hesitant. "Stabbed in jail. Cellmate got him an hour ago, lost a lot of blood, punctured lung, he's critical." Tamika's knees buckled, but she caught herself on the bed's rail, staring at Darius's still form. "Who did it?" she demanded, though she knew. The doctor shrugged. "Guard said it was a fight. That's all I got." She sank into a chair, the world narrowing to the beep of the monitor. An hour ago, right after the news broke, right after her win, she'd exposed Hensley, thought she'd protected Darius, but he'd reached into the jail, bribed a cellmate, turned her triumph into a bloodbath. She grabbed her phone, calling the jail, demanding answers, but the line rang dead. She stood, pacing the room, her shadow stretching long across the tiled floor. She'd sneaked into precinct files, leaked the truth, sparked a firestorm, and for what? Darius was dying, her career was gutted, and Hensley was laughing somewhere, his hands dripping red. Her victory had painted a target, not just on her, but on the one person she'd sworn to save. She leaned over Darius, brushing his clammy forehead, her voice a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'll fix this." But the words felt hollow, drowned by the machine's relentless beep. She'd thought she'd struck a blow, forced justice into the light, but they'd countered with a knife, a suspension, a betrayal so deep it cut to her core. The doctor lingered, watching her, then slipped out, leaving her alone with the wreckage. She pulled her badge from her pocket, staring at it, the silver dulled by fingerprints. It was supposed to mean something, supposed to protect them, but now it was a joke, a relic of a fight she was losing. She tucked it away, resolve hardening through the haze of guilt. She'd dig deeper, find more, make them pay. But as she sat vigil, the hospitals hum a grim soundtrack. She couldn't shake the truth. This war was bigger than she'd imagined, and the next blow might break them both. The ICU at Detroit General Hospital was a sterile purgatory, its white walls and linoleum floors reflecting the harsh glare of overhead lights. Tamika Jackson sat beside Darius Webb's bed, her chair creaking under her weight, the steady beep of the heart monitor slicing through the silence like a metronome of dread. Her cousin lay motionless, tubes snaking from his nose and arms, his face a patchwork of bruises and fresh stab wounds, the latest courtesy of Hensley's jailhouse puppet. Blood stained the bandages across his chest, his breathing shallow, each rise and fall a fragile thread holding him to life. She'd exposed the corruption ring, thought she'd won a battle with Jamal's news story. But Hensley had struck back, turning her triumph into this. Darius bleeding out, her Secret Service suspension dangling over her like a guillotine. Her hands gripped the bedrail, knuckles whitening, as guilt and fury churned in her gut. She'd pushed too hard, and now he was paying the price. The hospital clock ticked past 3 in the morning, its hands crawling through the fog of her exhaustion. She hadn't slept since the courtroom, hadn't eaten since the vandalism, her body running on adrenaline and spite. The doctor's words echoed in her head. Punctured lung, critical condition. An hour ago she'd watched Darius flatline once, the shrill alarm jolting her to her feet as nurses rushed in, defibrillators humming. They'd brought him back, barely, but the prognosis was grim. She'd demanded guards, protection, but the hospital staff shrugged, saying jail security was out of their hands. Those guards, Hensley's cronies, lurked in the halls, their radios crackling with whispers she couldn't hear. She knew they were waiting, watching, ready to finish what the cellmate started. She couldn't trust the system, not anymore. If she wanted Darius safe, she'd have to do it herself. Tamika slipped out of the room, her boots silent on the tiles, her Glock holstered under her blazer. She'd trained for worse, infiltrated cartel dens, dodged bullets in back alleys. This was personal, but her instincts were sharp. She scoped the hall, 2 guards at the far end, beefy men in tan uniforms, one chewing gum, the other scrolling. His phone. Their badges glinted under the lights, but their smirk screamed Hensley. She ducked into a supply closet, grabbing a lab coat and a clipboard, then pulled her hair into a messy bun. Disguise in place, she moved fast, slipping past a nurse's station, her heart pounding as she circled back toward the ICU's rear entrance. She needed to get Darius stable, get him out of reach, away from these wolves in uniform. She found Dr. Patel, the wiry physician from earlier, scribbling notes in a break room, his glasses fogged from a steaming coffee mug. "Doctor," she said, stepping in, her voice low but firm. "My cousin's dying out there, and those guards are in on it. I need him stabilized now. Can you help?" Patel looked up, eyes narrowing, then sighed, setting the mug down. "I've seen the bruises, the timing. It's fishy, but moving him's risky. He's barely holding on." Tamika leaned closer, her badge peeking from her pocket, a silent plea. "Please, I'll take the risk. Just keep him alive." Patel hesitated, then nodded. "Give me 10 minutes. I'll push fluids, up the oxygen. Best I can do." She clasped his shoulder, a flicker of gratitude breaking through her steel facade. "Thank you." Back in the ICU, she watched Patel work, his hands steady as he adjusted IVs, the monitor's beep strengthening slightly. Darius's color improved, a faint pink creeping into his cheeks, and Tamika exhaled, a sliver of hope piercing the despair. She'd done it, bought him time, turned the tide against Hensley's hit. Her toughest win yet, a desperate grasp at control in a world slipping away. She whispered to him, "Hang on, Dee, I've got you," her voice cracking as she squeezed his hand. Patel stepped back, wiping his brow. He's stable for now, but he needs surgery soon or he won't make it. She nodded, mind racing. She'd call in favors, get him transferred, keep him breathing. She'd won this round, hadn't she? The victory lasted 6 minutes. A shadow fell across the doorway and Tamika spun, hand on her Glock as a figure loomed. Judge Harold Grayson, his robe swapped for a grey suit, his jowly face twisted with fury. Behind him, 4 cops in riot. Gear, batons drawn, their eyes cold and unyielding. "Tamika Jackson," Grayson boomed, his voice a gravelly snarl. "You're under arrest for tampering with a prisoner." Her stomach plummeted, disbelief freezing her in place. "What?" she snapped, stepping forward. "I'm saving him, not tampering." Grayson's smirk was venomous, his finger jabbing the air. "You've overstepped, girl. Warrants issued. You don't call shots here." The cops advanced, boots thumping, and she backed up, hands raised, mind reeling. She'd stabilized. Darius thought she'd outmaneuvered them, but Grayson had flipped it, turned her act of defiance into a crime. Before she could react, the lead cop lunged, slamming her against the wall, her cheek grinding into plaster. Pain flared as a taser's prongs bit into her side, electricity surging through her, muscles locking as she crumpled to the floor. She gasped, vision blurring, the room spinning as cuffs snapped onto her wrists, biting into her skin. Through the haze, she saw Grayson loom over Darius's bed, his smirk widening as he nodded to Patel. "You're done here, doctor." "Step out." Patel hesitated, then fled, leaving her alone with the wolves. She struggled, kicking against the cop, pinning her, her voice hoarse. "You can't do this. He'll die." Grayson chuckled, a low, guttural sound. "He's a prisoner, not your patient. You don't decide his fate." The cops hauled her up, dragging her toward the hall, her boots scraping the tiles. She twisted, catching a final glimpse of Darius, his monitor flatlining again, the shrill alarm piercing the air. Nurses rushed in, but a guard blocked them. His baton raised as Grayson watched, unblinking. Tamika screamed, a raw guttural sound tearing from her throat. "No, Darius!" But the cops yanked her harder, her arms wrenching in their sockets. The last thing she saw was his chest stilling, the line flattening before the door slammed shut behind her. She'd fought to save him, used every ounce of her training, thought she'd pulled him back from the edge. But Hensley's reach, Grayson's power, they'd countered. With a blow she couldn't dodge, her arrest, his death, a 1-2 punch that shattered her world. They shoved her into a squad car outside, rain streaking the windows, her breath fogging the glass as she stared blankly ahead. The cuffs dug into her wrists, her taser burns throbbing, but the real pain was deeper, a hollow ache where hope had been. Darius was gone, or so it seemed, flatlined as she was dragged away, her screams echoing uselessly in the hospitals. Sterile halls? She'd thought she'd won, stabilized him, defied the odds, but they'd turned it into her breaking point, a moment where despair swallowed her whole. The car lurched forward, tires splashing through puddles, and she clenched, her fists, nails cutting into her palms. This wasn't over. She'd fight, claw her way back, make them pay. But as the hospital faded in the rear view, the flatline's wail lingered, a ghost she couldn't outrun. Now let's get your take. Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think Tamika's arrest is an outrage that demands revenge, or a number 2 if you'd tell her to give up before she loses more. If Grayson's smug power play has you fuming, hit that like button. And if you're ready to see her rise from this despair, smash subscribe for the next twist. So, is Darius really gone? Or could a flicker of hope still be hiding in this chaos? What's Tamika got left to fight with now that she's cuffed and broken? Tune in to find out. The Wayne County Jail swallowed Tamika Jackson whole, its steel doors clanging shut behind her like the jaws of a trap. The squad car had dumped her here after Grayson's ambush at the hospital, her wrists still raw from the cuffs, her side aching from the taser's bite. The holding cell was a concrete box, 10 by 10, its walls stained with grime and despair, the air thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and bleach. She paced the floor, boots scuffing against cracked tiles, her mind a storm of fury and grief. Darius's flatline haunted her, that final scream as she was dragged away replaying in her skull. She'd stabilized him, fought off Hensley's goons, thought she'd clawed a victory from the jaws of death only for Grayson to slam her into this cage and let her cousin die. Her badge was gone, stripped by the cops who'd smirked as they booked her. Her suspension a shackle tighter than the steel around her wrists. But she wasn't broken. Not yet. She'd find a way out, make them pay, even if it killed her. The cell wasn't empty. 3 other women shared the space, their eyes tracking her restless steps. LaToya, a wiry 30-something with a scar slicing. Her eyebrow leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Her jumpsuit faded from too many washes. Keisha, barely 20, sat on a bunk, her braids tight, her gaze wary but curious. Monique, older, grey streaking her hair, perched on the edge of a bench, her hands clasped like she was praying. Tamika sized them up, years of Secret Service. Training kicking in, allies or threats. She stopped pacing, facing them, her voice low but steady. "You know Grayson?" LaToya snorted, a sharp, bitter sound. "Who doesn't? That bastard's locked up half my block. Me included. Drug charge planted." Keisha nodded, her voice soft. "Same, caught me with weed that wasn't mine. He laughed when I cried." Monique's eyes narrowed, her tone hard. "He's a devil with a gavel. Took my son too." Tamika's pulse quickened, a spark igniting in the dark. These women weren't just inmates, they were victims, Grayson's casualties, Hensley's collateral. She stepped closer, her shadow stretching across the cell. "I'm Tamika Jackson, Secret Service. Hensley framed my cousin Darius Webb. Grayson's burying him and now me. We've got a common enemy." LaToya pushed off the wall, interest flickering in her scarred face. "Secret Service? For real? What's your play?" Tamika's jaw tightened, her plan forming fast. "We get out, hit back. They don't expect us to fight from in here." Keisha's eyes widened, fear warring with hope. "Escape? They'll kill us." Monique shook her head, but her voice was firm. "They're already killing us slow. I'm in." The cell buzzed with tension, their whispers weaving a fragile alliance. Tamika mapped it out, her training a lifeline. The guard rotation, the weak lock on the outer gate, the chaos of shift change. She rallied them, voice low, urgent. "LaToya, your lookout. Keisha, distraction. Monique, muscle with me. We move at 6 when the night crew's sloppy." They nodded, a pact sealed in the gloom. Hours crawled by. The jails hum a dull roar until the clock hit 5:55. A guard, a lanky man with a lazy stride, shuffled past, keys jangling. Keisha sprang up, banging on the bars, wailing about a stomachache, her cries shrill and convincing. The guard grumbled, unlocking the cell, and LaToya slipped behind him, signaling clear. Tamika and Monique moved fast, Tamika's elbow cracking his jaw, Monique pinning his arms as he crumpled. They stripped his keys, radio crackling as they dragged him in, locking the door behind them. They bolted through the hall, a silent pack, Tamika leading with the stolen keys. Alarms hadn't sounded yet, the shift change masking their move. They hit the outer gate, a rusted slab, and Tamika jammed the key in, twisting hard. It groaned open, cold night air rushing in, freedom a heartbeat away. She turned to them, breath fogging. "Scatter, stay low, we'll regroup." They nodded, vanishing into the fog, and Tamika ran, legs pumping, the jail's floodlights fading behind her. She'd done it, broken out, turned Grayson's cage into her escape hatch. Darius's flatline still burned, but she'd learned something. He'd survived once before, revived by nurses. Maybe he wasn't gone. She hit a payphone 3 blocks away, dialing Jamal, the reporter. "Jamal, it's Tamika. Check the hospital. Darius might still be alive." His voice crackled, stunned. "You're out? I'll dig, lay low." She hung up, chest heaving, hope flickering through the despair. She'd reclaimed control, defied the system from inside its belly. Hours later, hiding in an abandoned warehouse, her phone buzzed, Jamal's text lighting the screen. "He's alive." Nurse hit him, revived off record, critical but breathing. Relief crashed over her, a wave so strong she nearly collapsed. Darius was alive, her toughest win yet, snatched from death's grip again. She'd escaped, rallied the wronged, turned Hensley's jail into her weapon. She leaned against the warehouse wall, rain tapping the roof, a rare smile breaking through. She'd won this round, hadn't she? Outsmarted them, kept Darius in the fight, but the night wasn't done with her. Her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She answered, cautious. Yeah? A voice, low and gleeful, cut through. Check. The news, Jackson. She scrambled, finding a busted radio in the warehouse, static crackling as she tuned it. A reporter's voice broke through. Breaking news! A fire in northwest Detroit has claimed a life. The home of Ella Jackson, aunt of fugitive Tamika. Jackson burned to the ground tonight. Arson suspected. Tamika's knees buckled, the radio slipping from her hands, shattering on the concrete. Ella, her aunt, the woman who'd raised her after her mom died, gone. The voice on the phone laughed, Hensley's growl unmistakable. Told you to back off, next time it's you. The line went dead, leaving her in silence. The rain's patter a grim drumbeat. She sank to the floor, the warehouse's damp chill seeping into her bones. She'd escaped, saved Darius, thought she'd seized the upper hand, but Hensley had countered with a blow that gutted her. Ella's house, her childhood refuge, torched, her aunt's gentle smile snuffed out in flames. The news cut deeper. Fugitive Tamika Jackson, wanted for jailbreak and now suspected in the arson. Grayson's voice followed, smug on the broadcast. She's a danger, a criminal. We'll find her. Her victory flipped into a nightmare, her escape twisted into a frame-up. Her family's blood on Hensley's hands. She clutched her knees, grief and rage warring inside her. The radio's static a funeral dirge. She'd rallied the inmates, broken free, kept Darius alive. But at what cost? Ella was dead, and she was a hunted woman. Her every move, a spark for Hensley's fire. Tamika stood wiping her face, the warehouse's shadows swallowing her tears. She'd thought she'd turned the tables, but they'd burned her world down instead. Darius was alive, yes, but hidden, vulnerable, and now she was a fugitive. Her aunt's death a weight she couldn't shed. She grabbed her gun, checking the clip, her resolve hardening through the pain. She'd fight, regroup, strike back harder. But as she slipped into the night, the fire's image burned in her mind, a warning that Hensley wouldn't stop, that the next blow would be deadlier still. The rain soaked her through, each drop a promise of the war ahead, and she vanished into the fog, a ghost with nothing left to lose. Rain streaked through Detroit's night, a relentless curtain soaking Tamika Jackson as she crouched in the shadows of an abandoned auto plant, its rusted skeleton looming like a forgotten titan. Her clothes clung to her skin, damp and heavy, but the cold couldn't touch the fire raging inside her. Ella's death burned in her chest, the news report of her aunt's torched home looping in her mind, Hensley's laugh on that phone call a taunt she'd never unhear. She'd escaped jail, rallied the wronged, learned Darius was alive, hidden by a nurse who'd defied the system, and thought she'd clawed back control. But Hensley had flipped it, murdered Ella, framed her as a fugitive arsonist, and turned her victory into ash. Now hunted and alone, she'd found refuge with a crew of activists, a scrappy band hiding in the plant's bowels, their faces lit by the glow of laptops and kerosene lanterns. She wasn't running anymore, she was fighting, and this was her. War Room. The group was small but fierce. Jamal Carter, the reporter who'd aired her exposé, hunched over a keyboard, his dreads tied back. Aisha, a wiry ex-hacker with tattoos snaking up her arms, cracking police codes, and Marcus, a hulking ex-con with a shaved head and a vendetta against Grayson. They'd taken her in after the jailbreak, patched her taser burns, and listened. As she spilled the truth, Hensley's racket, Grayson's complicity, Ella's blood, Tamika stood, her boots grinding glass into the concrete, and laid out her plan. "We've got one shot," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the drip of rain through cracked ceilings. "I hacked precinct logs before they suspended. Me, Grayson's dirty, tied to Hensley's payoffs. We leak it, bigger this time, national, spark a rebellion they can't ignore." Aisha grinned, her fingers flying over keys. "I'm in. Let's burn their house down. Jamal nodded, scribbling notes. I've got contacts at CNN, this'll blow up. Tamika pulled a USB from her pocket, the last of her Secret Service hacks, and handed it to Aisha. Every file I pulled, bank records, arrest patterns, Grayson's rulings, proof they're framing black folks for cash. Aisha plugged it in, screens blooming with data, her eyes widening. This is gold, offshore accounts, coded emails. Grayson's been pocketing thousands. Marcus cracked his knuckles, his voice a low rumble. Let's bury him. They worked fast, Tamika pacing as Aisha encrypted the leak, Jamal drafting a story that had hit like a bomb. By dawn, it was done, uploaded to dark web forums, emailed to every major outlet. A digital Molotov cocktail lobbed into the system's heart. Tamika watched the first reports break online, her breath catching as headlines screamed, "Detroit judge linked to cop corruption ring." Protests erupted outside the courthouse, chants echoing through the fog, a tide of rage she'd unleashed. She'd done it, turned Hensley's fire into her own, her biggest win yet. The city was waking up, and she was the spark. She stood at a shattered window, watching flames flicker in the distance, protesters clashing with riot cops. Her phone buzzed, Jamal's voice crackling through. "It's viral, Tamika. National. News feds sniffing around, you're a legend out there." Her lips twitched, a ghost of a smile breaking through the grief. Darius was alive, hidden, and now the world knew the truth. She'd gone rogue, struck from the shadows, and the pressure. Would force Grayson out, save her cousin. She'd won this round, hadn't she? But the plant's silence shattered as boots thumped outside, a SWAT van's lights slicing through the fog. Hensley's voice boomed over a megaphone, chilling her blood. "Tamika Jackson, you're surrounded. Come out, or we come in." Her crew froze, Aisha cursing, Marcus grabbing a crowbar. Tamika drew her Glock, heart pounding. She'd lit the city ablaze, thought she'd outrun them, but Hensley had tracked her, turned her rebellion into a trap. The team scrambled, Tamika barking orders. "Aisha, back door, Marcus with me." They bolted for a rusted tunnel beneath the plant, an old escape route Marcus knew from his smuggling days. Flashbangs popped behind them, smoke curling through, the halls as SWAT breached the main floor. Tamika led, gun raised, the tunnel's damp walls closing in, her boots splashing through puddles. They emerged in an alley, rain pelting their faces, and split, Aisha and Marcus vanishing into the night. Tamika ducked behind a dumpster, catching her breath, the raid's chaos fading. She'd escaped again, kept the fight alive, her leak still, burning through the system. But her phone buzzed, a video link from an unknown number. She opened it, dread coiling in her gut, and saw Darius, strapped to a gurney, his face pale, a gun pressed to his temple. Hensley's face filled the screen, grinning like a jackal. "Found your boy, Jackson. Live feed, citywide. Come get him or he's done." The video cut to protesters, screens flashing the execution threat, panic spreading. Tamika's knees buckled, the alley's shadows swallowing her gasp. She'd hacked their secrets, sparked a revolution, thought she'd shielded Darius with the uproar, but Hensley had ripped him from hiding, staged this horror to lure her out. Her win flipped into a death trap, her cousin's life dangled as bait, the city watching in real time. She clutched her gun, rain mixing with the tears she wouldn't let fall. Ella's death a fresh scar beside this new wound. The plant burned in the distance, protesters screaming, sirens wailing, and she stood, resolve hardening through the terror. She'd started this fire, and now it was consuming everything she loved. She'd go to him, fight through hell, end this. But as she moved, the video's echo lingered, Hensley's grin a promise of worse to come, and Detroit's streets ignited with a war she'd never planned. Now, what's your verdict? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you're cheering Tamika's rogue rebellion against this corrupt mess, or a number 2 if you think she's lit a fuse she can't put out. If Hensley's sick execution stunt has you on edge, smash that like button, and if you're dying to see her next move, hit subscribe for the showdown. So can Tamika storm in and save Darius from Hensley's twisted game, or has her underground fight just signed his death warrant? What's brewing in this blazing city next? Stay locked in to find out. The Wayne County Courthouse stood like a fortress under Detroit's stormy sky. its grey stone walls battered by sheets of rain that mirrored the chaos boiling in Tamika Jackson's chest. She'd seen the video, Hensley's gun pressed to Darius's temple, the live feed taunting her from every screen in the city. Her underground leak had sparked riots, exposed Grayson's dirty money, thought she'd cornered them, but Hensley had yanked Darius from hiding, turning her rebellion into a public death threat. Now soaked and hunted, she stormed the courthouse steps, her Glock tucked under her blazer, her breath ragged but her resolve ironclad. Today was Darius's contempt hearing, a sham Grayson had rushed to bury her jailbreak, and she'd crash. It forced the truth into the open, save her cousin or die trying. The streets pulsed with protesters, their chants a war cry she carried inside. She slipped through the crowd, hood up, rain dripping from her lashes, and pushed into courtroom B. The gallery was packed, a sea of faces buzzing with tension, reporters craning for a scoop, activists whispering her name. Darius sat at the defense table, pale and bruised, his wrists cuffed, a guard looming over him. Hensley wasn't there, but his shadow hung heavy, the video's threat a noose tightening around them both. Judge Harold Grayson presided from his bench, his jowly face flushed, his robe a cloak of arrogance despite the protests shaking his world. Tamika took a breath, shedding her hood, and strode to the front, her boots echoing on the marble floor. Gasps rippled through the room as she reached the bar, pulling her badge from her pocket and slamming it onto the table, the silver gleaming under the lights. "Special Agent Tamika Jackson," she declared, her voice a blade cutting through the murmurs. "This hearing stops now. Release Darius Webb." Grayson's eyes widened, his gavel hovering mid-air, shock flickering across his bloated features. The gallery erupted, shouts and camera flashes exploding as she held up the USB drive, her voice rising. "I've got proof. Your payoffs, Hensley's, frames a racket bleeding this city dry. It's over, Grayson. Let him go, or this hits every news desk in America." She tossed the drive to the defense attorney, a stunned kid who fumbled it, then clutched it like a lifeline. She'd hacked their secrets, leaked them wide, thought she'd won with the riots, but this was her boldest move yet. A direct hit, in his own courtroom with the world watching. The room roared, protesters banging on the doors outside, and Grayson's smirk faltered, his hand trembling as he banged the gavel. "Order!" he bellowed, his voice cracking, but the chaos drowned him out. Tamika stepped closer, her badge a beacon, her gaze locked on his. "You're done," she said, loud enough for the mics to catch. "The feds are coming. Darius walks now." The attorney scrambled, waving the USB. "Your Honor, this evidence—" Grayson cut him off, slamming the gavel again, his face reddening. "Sit down, Jackson. You're a fugitive, not a hero." But the gallery wouldn't quiet. Their shouts, a tidal wave crashing over his bench. She'd done it, seized the room, turned his power into a joke. Her boldest win yet. A public reckoning that had freed Darius, toppled Grayson, end this nightmare. She stood tall, chest heaving, as the crowd chanted her name, a surge of triumph breaking through the grief. She'd won this round, hadn't she? Grayson leaned forward, his jowls quivering, and his smirk crept back, a venomous twist that chilled her spine. "You think you run this court?" he growled, banging the gavel once more. "Tamika Jackson, you're in contempt. 30 days, immediate custody." The room gasped, a collective recoil, but he wasn't done. And Darius Webb remand to Supermax pending trial, no bail. He nodded to the bailiff, a hulking man who grabbed Darius, yanking him up as the cuffs rattled. Tamika lunged, shouting, "You can't do this." But Grayson's laugh boomed, a dark, guttural sound that mocked her badge, her proof, her stand. "I just did," he said, leaning back, his victory reclaimed. The gallery surged, protesters pounding the walls, but the bailiff dragged Darius out, his eyes meeting hers in a fleeting plea before he vanished through a side door. Tamika stood frozen, the USB's weight meaningless now. Her triumph flipped into a crushing defeat. She'd stormed in, exposed him, thought she'd forced his hand, but Grayson had doubled down, locked Darius away in a fortress she couldn't breach. 2 guards grabbed her, wrenching her arms behind her, but she broke free. Adrenaline surging and bolted for the exit. The courtroom dissolved into pandemonium, reporters shouting, activists rushing the bench. She hit the hall, rain-soaked air. hitting her face as she burst outside. The protesters roar a shield as she weaved through them. She'd lost Darius again, but she'd escape, regroup, fight another day. Her boots pounded the pavement, the courthouse fading when tires screeched behind her. A black SUV cutting through the crowd. Hensley leapt out, his buzz-cut scalp glistening, a pistol in hand, flanked by 3 goons in tactical gear. "Jackson!" he roared, and she spun, drawing her Glock, but a shot rang out, grazing her shoulder, blood blooming hot and wet. Pain seared through her, but she fired back, her bullet clipping Hensley's arm, his snarl twisting as he staggered. The goons charged, batons swinging, and she ducked, slamming one into the pavement, her training a blur of instinct. Another tackled her, pinning her to the wet asphalt, her guns skittering away as fists rained down. She fought, nails clawing, but a boot cracked her ribs, air rushing out in a gasp. Hensley loomed over her, blood dripping from his arm, his grin feral. "You're dead, bitch," he spat, raising his gun, but sirens wailed nearby, protesters closing in, and he cursed, retreating to the SUV with his crew, tires squealing as they peeled off. Tamika rolled to her knees, coughing blood, the rain washing it into the gutter. Her shoulder throbbed, her ribs screaming, but she staggered up, the crowd's chaos swallowing her escape. She crashed the hearing, flashed her badge, dropped the proof, thought she'd won Darius's freedom, but Grayson had caged him in Supermax, and Hensley had ambushed her, nearly ended her. Her win flipped into a blood-soaked rout. Her cousin, exiled, her body broken. She stumbled into an alley, clutching her side, the courthouse's shadow stretching long behind her. Hensley's parting words echoed, a vow of worse to come. "Next time I finish it." She'd fought head-on, risked everything, but they'd countered with a gavel and a gun, leaving her hunted, bleeding, and alone. She leaned against a brick wall, rain mixing with her tears, and pulled her phone, dialing Jamal. "They've got Darius in Supermax," she rasped. "I'm hit. Need help." The line crackled, his voice faint. "Hang on, Tamika. We'll find you." She slid down the wall, the city's pulse a distant roar, her shoulders blood pooling beneath her. She'd thought she'd turned the tide, forced justice into that courtroom, but they'd struck back harder, faster, deadlier. Darius was gone, locked in a concrete tomb, and Hensley was out there, wounded but alive, his promise a blade hanging over her. She clutched her phone, breath shallow, the rain a cold shroud. She'd fight, regroup, claw her way back, but as darkness crept into her vision, the alley's silence pressed in, a grim reminder that this war was far from won, and the next blow might be her last. Rain hammered Detroit streets, a relentless drumbeat soaking the alley where Tamika Jackson slumped against a brick wall, her shoulder bleeding through her torn blazer, her ribs aching with every shallow breath. The courthouse showdown replayed. In her mind, her badge flashing, Grayson's smirk faltering, the crowd's roar as she dropped the USB of proof. She'd thought she'd won, forced a crack in their corrupt empire, but Hensley's ambush had flipped it, his bullet grazing her, his goons beating her down. Darius was gone, shipped to Supermax, and now she was a fugitive, hunted and broken. The city's chaos a distant hum beyond the alley's shadows. Her phone buzzed in her hand, Jamal's voice crackling through the static. "Tamika, stay put. I've got people coming, you're hit bad." She nodded, though he couldn't see, her voice a rasp. "Hurry." She pressed her hand to the wound, blood seeping between her fingers, warm and sticky against the cold rain. Her Glock was gone, lost in the fight, her badge confiscated when they'd booked her. She'd stormed the courtroom, rallied the protesters, thought she'd sparked a reckoning. But Grayson had locked Darius away, and Hensley had turned her defiance into a bloodbath. Now, hiding in this filthy alley, she clung to one last thread, her allies. Jamal had contacts, Aisha's hacking skills, Marcus's muscle. She'd sue Grayson, force a federal probe, drag Darius out of that concrete tomb. She gritted her teeth, pain sharpening her focus, and dialed Aisha. "It's me," she said when the line picked up. "Grayson's exposed. File a lawsuit. Use the leak. Get the feds in." Aisha's voice was tight, urgent. "On it, Tamika, we're lawyering up. Hang in there." Minutes later, headlights cut through the rain, a beat-up van skidding to a stop. Jamal leapt out, his dreads plastered. To his face, Marcus towering behind him with a first aid kit. They hauled her in, the van's interior stinking of rust and gasoline, and Marcus patched her shoulder, his thick fingers surprisingly deft with gauze. "Bullets out. Grazed you good," he grunted, taping it tight. Jamal gripped the wheel, eyes flicking to the rear view. "Lawsuits filed, Tamika. Feds are sniffing Grayson's accounts. You did it." She leaned back, the van's rumble vibrating her bruised ribs, a flicker of hope piercing the haze. She'd taken a hit, lost Darius to Supermax, but the probe was her last win, a lifeline to pull him back. The leak had worked. The riots had pressure, and now the law would finish it. She'd won this round, hadn't she? The van lurched through the city, weaving past flashing sirens and protest fires, when a blast shook the night, a deafening roar that rattled the windows. Tamika jolted upright, pain forgotten, as Marcus cursed, pointing ahead. A plume of smoke rose from the east side, flames licking the sky where the activist safe house stood, the old auto plant they'd used as a base. Jamal floored it, tires screeching, and they hit the scene minutes later, the plant engulfed, its steel beams glowing red, bodies strewn across the rubble. Aisha stumbled from the wreckage, her arm charred, coughing ash as she waved them down. "Hensley," she rasped, collapsing against the van. "Bomb! He knew we were there." Tamika's stomach dropped, the air sucked from her lungs. Dozens dead, her crew decimated, the safe house a graveyard. She'd thought the lawsuit would shield them, force Hensley back, but he'd struck with a vengeance that dwarfed her courtroom stand. She climbed out, rain mixing with soot on her face, and knelt beside Aisha, the heat from the blaze searing her skin. "How?" she whispered, though she knew. Aisha's eyes glistened, her voice breaking. "Tracked us after the leak. Planted it during the raid. Said you're next." Tamika's fists clenched, the lawsuit's triumph curdling into horror. She'd rallied her allies, pushed the feds in, thought she'd turned the tide, but Hensley had flipped it, bombed her base, killed her people. Sirens wailed closer, cops swarming the scene, and Jamal pulled her back. "We gotta move. They'll pin this on you." She resisted, staring at the flames, the weight of the dead crushing her. Ella's death, Darius's beating, now this, all because she'd dared to fight. She'd won a flicker of justice, hadn't she? But at what cost? They fled, the van peeling into the night, leaving the inferno behind. Tamika's phone buzzed, a news alert. Secret Service disowns fugitive Tamika Jackson, labels her traitor after bombing. Her breath hitched, the screen's glow a knife in her gut. A statement from her supervisor, Paul Carver, followed. "She's no agent of ours, her actions endangered lives." She flung the phone, the crack of it hitting the dash, lost in the rain's roar. They'd cut her loose, branded her a terrorist, turned her badge into a lie. She'd thought the probe would save her, shield Darius, but the agency had flipped, abandoned her to Hensley's frame-up. She sank into the seat, blood seeping through Marcus's bandage, her body a map of pain. She'd lost everything. Her home, her aunt, her crew, her career, all for a fight she couldn't win. The van stopped at a derelict motel, its neon sign buzzing faintly, and Jamal helped her inside, the room's moldy walls closing in. She collapsed on a sagging bed, staring at the ceiling, when her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Supermax update. Webb shanked comatose." Her heart stopped, a scream trapped in her throat. Darius, her last anchor, stabbed again, his life fading in a cell she couldn't reach. She'd sued Grayson, sparked the feds, thought she'd protected him, but Hensley's reach had slipped through, a knife in the dark. She rolled off the bed, staggering to the bathroom, and vomited, the acid burning her throat as despair swallowed her whole. Ella dead, her crew bombed, Darius dying, and her a traitor, hunted by the world she'd sworn to serve. She stumbled back, sinking to the floor, the motel's hum a grim requiem. The TV flickered on, Grayson's face filling the screen, his smirk intact as he spoke to reporters. "Justice prevails. Jackson's a myth, a criminal. I'm cleared. Untouchable." She stared, numb, the probe's promise snuffed out, Hensley's bomb erasing her fight. She'd rallied allies, sued the system, thought she'd struck a blow, but they'd countered with a massacre. a disownment, a shanking that broke her last hope. She clutched her badge, pried from her pocket during the escape, its silver dulled by blood and grime. It was all she had left, a relic of a life they'd torched. She curled into herself, the floor cold against her cheek, rain tapping the window like a countdown. She'd fight, she told herself, claw back from this abyss. But as darkness closed in, the weight of her losses pinned her down, a collapse she couldn't outrun. The motel room was a dank cave, its peeling wallpaper curling like dead skin, the air thick with mildew and the faint buzz of a dying fluorescent bulb. Tamika Jackson lay sprawled on the grimy carpet, her shoulders blood-soaked bandage seeping anew, her ribs a throbbing cage around each breath. Darius's coma haunted her, the text's words shanked comatose, a fresh wound atop Ella's death, the activist bombing, and the Secret Service's betrayal. She'd sued Grayson, sparked a federal probe, thought she'd clawed a lifeline, but Hensley's bomb had killed her crew and the agency had branded her a traitor. Her badge, clutched in her fist, was a dulled relic, its shine lost to the wreckage of her fight. She'd hit bottom, the collapse total, until a shadow moved in the doorway, a figure stepping from the rain-soaked night into her despair. He was tall, lean, with a graying buzz cut and a face carved from years of hard choices. Agent Daniel Reese, a rogue Secret Service vet she'd trained with a decade ago. His trench coat dripped puddles onto the floor, his eyes scanning her broken form with a mix of pity and resolve. "Tamika," he said, his voice gravelly but steady, "you look like hell." She pushed herself up, wincing, her Glock lost, but her instincts sharp. "Reese, what are you doing here?" He knelt, pulling a medkit from his bag, and started rebandaging her shoulder, his hands quick and sure. "Heard the news. Bombing. Disownment. Carver's a coward, cutting you loose. So I dug into Grayson's files after your leak. Found more dirty money trails, offshore accounts, Hensley's cut. I'm in." Tamika's breath hitched, hope flickering through the haze. Reese was a ghost in the agency, a man who'd bucked orders to take down a senator's trafficking ring, earning exile but keeping his edge. "Why help me?" she rasped, pain sharpening her words. He tied off the bandage, meeting her gaze. "Because this stinks of everything we swore to stop. Corruption, murder, racism. You're not a traitor. They are." He pulled a tablet, swiping to a spreadsheet. Grayson's payoffs, millions funneled through shell companies. Hensley's name tied to every frame-up. "This'll bury them," he said, handing it to her. "But we've got to move fast. They're cornered, desperate." She nodded, the data a lifeline, her resolve reigniting. She'd rise from this pit, strike back with Reese as her unexpected sword. They slipped out, the motel's neon flickering behind them, rain cloaking their steps as they hit a safe house Reese had secured, a cramped loft above a shuttered bar. He'd tracked Grayson's next move, a live TV debate downtown, a chance to spin his innocence to the city. Tamika saw it, a stage to end this, and planned her strike. She cleaned up, swapping her bloodied clothes for a borrowed jacket, her shoulders stiff but functional, her ribs taped tight by Reese. They rigged a feed, hacking the broadcast with Aisha's old tricks, and at 8 sharp, Tamika stormed the studio, Reese covering the rear. The set was bright, a polished lie. Grayson mid-speech in a tailored suit, his jowls quivering as he waved off the bombing. "Tamika Jackson's a myth," he boomed, "a criminal I've outlasted." She burst in, shoving past security, the tablet raised like a torch. "Lies!" she shouted, her voice cutting through his drone, the crowd gasping as cameras swung to her. "Here's the truth. Grayson's payoffs, Hensley's frames, millions stolen from this city." She slammed the tablet onto the podium, Reese streaming it live, the screen behind Grayson flashing with bank records, emails, proof undeniable. The studio erupted, reporters shouting, Grayson's face paling, his smirk freezing into a mask of shock. "You're finished," she said, stepping closer, her presence a storm breaking his calm. "The feds have this now. You're done." The crowd roared, a wave of outrage crashing over him, and Reese signaled from the back, "It's viral, they can't bury it." She'd done it, turned her collapse into a reckoning, her boldest win yet, a public gut punch that had freed Darius. Hadn't Grayson? She'd won this round, hadn't she? Her triumph lasted seconds. Her phone buzzed, a video link from an unknown number, and she opened it, dread clawing her throat. Hensley's face filled the screen, his buzz-cut scalp gleaming, a savage grin twisting his lips. Behind him, her mother, Lena, knelt on a concrete floor, hands bound, a gun pressed to her graying temple. "Hey, Jackson," he sneered, the feed cutting to a live stream, citywide screens flickering with the hostage scene. "Thought you'd play hero? Surrender, or she's brains on the wall." The studio fell silent, gasps rippling through, Grayson's shock shifting to a faint, smug nod as if he'd known. Tamika's knees buckled, the tablet slipping from her hand, shattering on the floor. She'd exposed Grayson, thought she'd sealed his fate, but Hensley had flipped it, snatched Lena from her quiet suburb, turned her victory into a nightmare. She clutched the podium, rain-soaked hair plastered to her face, the crowd's roar fading to a distant hum. "Where is she?" she screamed at the screen, but Hensley laughed, cutting the feed, leaving her, with static and terror. Reese grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "It's a trap, Tamika, we'll find her." But she shook him off, resolve hardening through the panic. "He wants me. I'll go." She stumbled out, the studio's lights blinding, the city's pulse a war drum in her ears. She'd stormed the debate, dropped the proof, thought she'd won Darius's freedom, but Hensley had countered with her mother, a hostage play that dwarfed the bombing. She hit the street, rain washing the blood from her bandage, and called the number back, her voice ablade. "Hensley, I'm coming. Let her go," he answered, his glee a knife twist. "Warehouse East Side. Alone or she's dead." She hung up, turning to Reese, who'd followed, his face grim. "I've got no choice," she said, stripping her badge from her pocket and tossing it into a puddle, the silver sinking into the muck. "Get Darius out, I'll handle this." Reese protested, but she was already moving, hijacking a bike from a stunned protester, its engine roaring as she sped into the night. She'd exposed Grayson, rallied an ally, thought she'd turned the tide. But Hensley's trap snapped shut, her mother's life the bait. The warehouse loomed ahead, a rusted hulk under flickering lights, and she dismounted, rain dripping from her lashes as she walked in, hands raised, seemingly defeated. Hensley stood inside, Lena bound at his feet, his gun gleaming, his grin a promise of pain. "Welcome, Jackson," he said, kicking Lena's chair. "Kneel or she's first." Tamika stopped 10 feet away, her heart pounding, the city's chaos a faint echo beyond the walls. She'd risen from collapse, struck with Reese's help, thought she'd won a reckoning, but Hensley had flipped it, turned her mother into a pawn, her surrender the price. She sank to her knees, rain pooling around her, the warehouse's shadows swallowing her defiance. She'd fought to the edge, but now, cuffed by fear, she waited, the gun's barrel a cold eye staring her down. And the war she'd waged teetered on the brink of total loss. The warehouse was a cavern of rust and echoes, its cracked concrete floor slick with rain that dripped through a sagging roof, pooling around Tamika Jackson as she knelt before Carl Hensley. Her mother, Lena, sat bound to a chair 10 feet away, her grey hair matted with sweat, her eyes wide with terror as Hensley pressed a pistol to her temple. The dim glow of a single bulb swung overhead, casting jagged shadows across his buzz-cut scalp and twisted grin, a predator savoring his trap. Tamika's hands rested on her knees, rain-soaked and empty, her Glock long gone, her badge discarded, in a puddle miles back. She'd stormed Grayson's TV debate with Reese's proof, thought she'd won with the city's roar and a federal probe, but Hensley had flipped it, kidnapped Lena, and forced her surrender. Her shoulder throbbed, her ribs ached, and Darius lay comatose in Supermax. Yet she stared Hensley down, her voice steady despite the defeat clawing her gut. "Let her go, Hensley. You've got me." He laughed, a harsh barking sound that bounced off the walls, his gun steady against Lena's head. "Oh, I've got you all right, Jackson, kneeling like a good little snitch. You thought you'd burn me down with your leaks? Grayson's still free, and you're nothing now." He kicked Lena's chair, making her gasp, and Tamika flinched, her fists clenching, nails cutting into her palms. She'd walked in, hands raised, playing the beaten hero, but her mind raced, searching for a crack, a way out. She'd trained for this, faced death in darker corners, and Hensley's arrogance was a chink she could pry open. "You're a coward," she said, her tone low, deliberate, baiting him, hiding behind an old woman. "You're scared, Hensley. I've already won. The feds are coming." His grin faltered, eyes narrowing, and he stepped forward, lowering the gun from Lena to aim it at Tamika's chest. "Big talk for a dead woman. Grayson's untouchable, and you're a ghost. Say goodbye." His finger tightened on the trigger, the barrel a black void, and Tamika braced, her breath steady, waiting for the shot. But then Lena moved, a blur of motion no one expected. Her chair rocked, her bound hands twisting free. She'd slipped the knots, years as a retired cop surging. Back, she lunged, slamming her shoulder into Hensley's legs, and he stumbled, the gun firing wild, the bullet cracking into the wall behind Tamika. She sprang up, adrenaline drowning her pain, and tackled him, her fist smashing his jaw, bone crunching under her knuckles. Hensley roared, swinging back, but Lena grabbed his arm, wrenching the gun free as Tamika pinned him, her knee grinding into his spine. The weapon skidded across the floor, and Lena snatched it, standing over him, her hands trembling but her aim true. "Stay down," she snapped, her voice a steel whip, and Hensley froze, blood dripping from his split lip, his grin gone. Tamika stared, disbelief warring with pride. Her mother, the quiet widow she'd thought helpless, had trained her own escape, turned her surrender into a ruse. "You planned this?" she gasped, holding Hensley's wrists as he thrashed. Lena nodded, rain streaking her face. "Taught you to fight, didn't I? When he grabbed me, I waited, knew you'd come." Tamika tightened her grip, a fierce grin, breaking through. She'd walked into a trap, thought she'd lost, but Lena had flipped it, turned Hensley's game into their victory. The warehouse door burst open, Reese charging in with 2 feds, their badges flashing, guns drawn. "Hands up!" Reese shouted, and Hensley slumped, his fight draining as cuffs snapped onto his wrists. Tamika stood, helping Lena up, the gun clattering to the floor. Reese tossed her a phone, already streaming live. Protesters had hacked the feed, broadcasting Hensley's takedown citywide. "Got him mid-confession," Reese said, nodding to the feds. "Grayson's running. We nabbed him at the airport, private jet packed with cash." Tamika's chest heaved, rain and relief washing over her. The feds hauled Hensley out, his arm limp from her shot in the courthouse fight, his snarl muted by defeat. She'd surrendered, thought she'd lost everything, but Lena's twist and Reese's timing had flipped it. A triple blow. Hensley cuffed, Grayson caught. The truth live for all to see. They stepped outside, the rain easing, Detroit's skyline glinting under clearing clouds. A chopper buzzed overhead, medics rushing in, and Tamika's phone rang. Jamal, his voice crackling with urgency. "Darius woke up, Tamika. Supermax Hospital, he's talking. Testifying via video now, clearing you." She sank to the curb, Lena's arm around her, the weight lifting as sirens wailed Grayson and Hensley away. Darius's voice broke through a live feed on Reese's tablet, weak but firm. "Tamika's no traitor. Hensley framed me. Grayson covered it. She saved us." The feds nodded, one handing her a reinstatement letter, her badge restored. She took it, the silver cold in her hand, but her eyes hardened. "Keep it," she said, tossing it back. "I'm done with your system. It's rotten. I'll fight my way." Reese frowned, but Lena squeezed her shoulder, pride in her gaze. "You're free, baby. We all are." Tamika stood, the city's pulse a living thing around her, protesters cheering as Grayson's arrest hit screens, Hensley's crippled form dragged to a van. She'd thought she'd lost, knelt to save Lena, but her mother's move, Reese's raid, and Darius's words had flipped it, a victory snatched from despair. Grayson was jailed, Hensley broken, and Detroit burned with hope, unrest simmering in its veins. She walked away, Lena beside her, the badge abandoned, her path clear. Dismantle the rot, not serve it. The rain stopped, the horizon glowing gold, but her shadow stretched long, a promise of battles ahead, a war unfinished. This gripping tale of Tamika Jackson's fight against systemic racism and corruption offers profound lessons. First, resilience is a weapon. Tamika faced relentless setbacks, vandalism, betrayal, and loss, yet her determination turned despair into defiance, proving that strength lies in refusing to break. Second, allies can emerge from unexpected places. Lena's hidden courage and Reese's rogue support flipped the script, showing that even in isolation, help can shift the tide. Third, truth is a double-edged sword. Exposing Grayson and Hensley sparked justice but unleashed chaos, teaching that victories often come with unforeseen costs. Fourth, systems can fail the very people they claim to protect. The Secret Service's abandonment and the court's bias revealed how institutions can shield the corrupt while crushing the righteous. Finally, personal sacrifice fuels change. Tamika lost her home, her aunt, and nearly her life, yet her rejection of a flawed system at the end ignited a broader fight, proving that real justice demands more than survival, it demands revolution. These lessons resonate beyond the story. Tamika's journey mirrors countless real struggles against racial injustice, where resilience, unexpected aid, and painful truth expose systemic rot. Her choice to walk away, not bow, challenges us to question who justice truly serves. So, what's your takeaway? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Did Tamika's stand inspire you, or do you see another path? If her fight against this racist story stirred you, hit like and subscribe for more tales of grit and grace. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Thanks for joining this journey. May you find courage to confront your own battles and hope to reshape a fractured world.